I recently had this hard metal case fall in my lap. Someone gave me, they were throwing away. So I decided I'd bring it to the shop and see what I could do with it. So on measuring the inside, I come up with about 10 and a half, 11 by 22 and a half, somewhere in there. So with all the extra stock I got laying around, I decided why not build a pedal board for my guitar effects pedals. So I started removing the nails with my air locker pneumatic remover. And sometimes if you freehand hold them like that, you will have to use a pry bar to get the rest of the nails out. But I got my metal detector out, checking for nails. Always check for nails or other metal. At one time you don't check, that'll be the time they get you. So now with all the nails removed, I decide I need 3 pieces 20 and a half inches long and 2 pieces 10 inches long. So basically I'm cutting off nail holes whenever I can. Sometimes you just can't avoid them because they're going to end up being in the center, but usually all the ends are split anyway from breaking the pallet apart, so I cut those off quite often and try not to use those pieces unless I absolutely have to. You could stack all 3 boards on each other and cut them all in one cut if you wanted to. But I usually like to do them single depending on the size and thickness of the wood that I'm cutting. So a lot of times safety first, so it's always a good policy. So that's the reason you see me cutting them and measuring them one at a time. Now heading on over to the planer. This is the Viver 13-inch planer. I really like this. A lot of times to me this is probably the most fun out of doing the project. What I'm doing here is I'm not really taking off a lot. I'm not trying to thin down the wood in any way. I'm basically just taking off the outer rough edges. So it'll save you a lot of hassle and sanding in the long run when you do it this way. If you don't have a planer, I mean, you're going to be spending a little bit of time sanding to make this look right on both sides, whereas in the planer I can get the same effect done in way less than half the time. So that's the reason I like to run everything through the planer. Plus it's just fun. I like doing it to see the actual natural color of the wood. So now I'm just measuring over 3/4 inch on each end to get a slant marked here, and so hopefully with any luck I'll be able to use both pieces on the left and the right side. So using a clamp, I just clamp the board down to my work table and I get out a jigsaw and cut the line dead on the line, not on the right or left, but try to go dead center of the line. And of course you run to the end, move your clamp, and try to think safety here. I had a lot of these buck up and down in my day and smash my fingers, so always best to use a clamp whenever possible. And then you have your 2 pieces. I just kind of take them over to the sander and hit them a little bit, but come back over here. Now I'm going to clamp these together so I can sand the edges with my DeWalt sander. I'm using 80 grit right now, just trying to get all the rough edge off, because I could have actually probably run it through the planer like this, but I'd had to put it in a little bit of a clamp jig to go through, and I don't recommend that. So that's the reason I clamped them together and just sand all 3 of them at the same time. Now you can sand them to any depth you like. There's not going to be a lot of visible wood left once it's all put together. So now I'm just taking out some wood glue, and I'm going to glue the ends of the pieces and just glue them to the sides and secure them in place with some 18 gauge brad nails about 1.25 inches long. Now the brad nails are just to hold the pieces together until my glue dries. I will be going back later and countersinking some holes and putting screws in each board, and probably do some wooden plugs as well to conceal the screws and make it look a lot nicer. So I mount the first board to the flush to the outside of the runners. And I did the same thing with the second board. I just put it in there flush at the top and flush on the ends just to make sure. And I run a brad nail in just to hold it in place. And then on the center board, I basically just mark the center of the runners on the outer sides. And then get my center board marked as well. And put it in place too using wood glue. And
1.25 brad nails, 18 gauge. Now while the glue dries, I just decided to do some more sanding. So I'm running 220 grit down just to make it smooth here and there. And of course I want to get all in between the edges and anywhere that I may have wiring or cabling or fingers may go. I like to get that as smooth as possible. So to keep from rounding over my edges, I take a piece of 220 grit sandpaper and just wrap it around a scrap piece of wood I have laying around the shop, so it'll fit in there pretty good and it won't round the edges over so bad. Now if you won't round it over edges, I suggest using a coarser grit sandpaper such as a 60 or 80, and just use the scrap piece block and sand in between until you get the effect that you're looking for. Then I would go back with something smoother again, such as 220, and just sand it down until you get it feeling the way you would like for it to feel.
So now I'm just taking out my quick flip tool made by Craig, and I'm drilling a pilot hole plus a countersink hole at the same time. This tool is pretty cool if you hadn't used one before. If you're using pocket screws especially, you just drill your pilot holes and then you can flip the bit around and run your screws in right there. I'm going to be using number 8 by 1 1/4 deck screw because I want to come back with wood plugs to plug the holes and try to hide the screws. So I wanted that screw to set in as flush as possible so I can get more of a peg in the hole. Use caution when using a power driver to run your screws in. You don't want to over tighten and split your project. I might even suggest a hand screwdriver for beginners. So now I'm just pulling out a basic plug cutter and using a scrap piece of wood left over from this project. I'm just drilling down. You don't have to drill all the way through. I'm just drilling down about 1/2 inch deep. Then I just go back with a pocket knife and just pop the plugs out. These are relatively inexpensive. You can find them at Harbor Freight and Amazon and other places like this. So I just continue on drilling them until I get enough to cover my holes. So now I just pull out the Type Bond 3 wood glue and just put just a little in the hole. You don't need a whole lot. As you start knocking these down with a wooden hammer, it's going to kind of push out a lot, so you don't want to overfill the holes. You can also put a little glue on the peg if you like, but it's not necessary. So I just go to both sides, putting in my plugs. The plugs should fit perfectly. They're 3/8 inch. The Craig Quick Flip drills that for you, so when you make your plug, make sure you use a 3/8 size. And so I just knock them in till they're all flush, and I come back with my little handsaw and just sand them off as flush as possible. You don't have to get close enough up to the project to where you scratch it, but you can just sand down as short as you can get them and then go back with your sander and just level them off to the top. And it makes a really good look when you get done with this. Now that you've come this far, you can stain the project if you would like to. Me personally, I'm just going to use a water-based clear coat poly and just start on the bottom side, just evenly smooth it out. Just do, whatever you'd like to do. Make sure you get in between the boards also. Be careful when you're using poly, because poly will run on you if you're not real careful doing it. So you don't want it to run to your other side, and when you come back and it's be dried, you'll have to do a lot of sanding and picking to try to get that off. So just use a light coat on the first one. You don't have to do a whole lot here. You're basically just trying to get all the surface covered to protect your wood. You don't want any moisture or anything being able to leak down in there and causing problems later. So just apply it evenly and keep it smooth, and it'll look really nice when it's dried. So when the bottom finally dries enough to flip it over, I just turn it over and I repeat the process. I get inside the edges on all boards and then just evenly smooth out your top. No set amount of how many coats you should do. I think I ended up doing about 3, because one thing I've learned over the years of playing live music something is going to eventually get spilled on this, in this, and around this. It's just no way possible to avoid it. Something will happen eventually. So it's best to make sure your project is protected for some of these little accidents. So now with my little 3M rubber feet applied, I take a tape measure out. I'm just measuring center of the board. I'm going to be using a power bank by Hyrie, and I'll put a link to it in the description. It's pretty nice. I like the output it has. It has 12 volt, 18 volt, and it has about 7 9 volts. And most of my pedals are 9 volt and 12 volt, so this works out fine for what I'm using it for. So now I'll pull out some Velcro that I have left over from another project. It's sticky on one side, so I just basically measure the length of the power bank itself and then just cut a piece of both, and I'll be sticking one to the board and one to the bottom of the power supply. And keep in mind, you don't have to put yours center if you don't want to. I just wanted mine that way. You can go to the left or to the right. There's plenty of room, and this power supply is so thin that it'll fit pretty much anywhere on the first and possibly the second board without bottoming out on the floor. So now a quick power test to be sure everything's in order. I really like the blue LEDs on the ports. Those are pretty nice. So now I'm getting the Velcro back to the top slats. I like to install the soft part of the Velcro down on the slat because most of my pedals are coming off of an older pedal board that I've had for years. They already have the male side on. So that's basically the reason. You can do it opposite if you like, but I just wanted to keep it the same so I didn't have to replace all the Velcro on every pedal that I have that's going to be used on this board. So now with all the pieces cut, I just peel the back off one at a time and just eyeball it to center. You can measure it and mark it if you'd like to, but it's not necessary really. I just like to eyeball mine and get it on there and get it done. And this stuff's pretty decent with the sticky too, as you'll notice here. It gets kind of stuck down for a second because I didn't get it exactly right, but I was able to pull it off and move it. And there you have it. It's done and ready to rock. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.